Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for joining our second session for today's Yes Speaker series. Today we're joined by RallyRally Creative Directors Jay Wall and Kaila Jacques, who will take us on a journey of how design plays a critical role in social change. Before we get started, we would like to acknowledge that the land on which George Brown College is situated is the traditional territory of the Mississaugas of the New Credit First Nation and other Indigenous peoples who have lived on this land. Today, the meeting place of Toronto is still the home to many Indigenous people from across Turtle Island, and we're grateful to have the opportunity to work in the community and on this territory. Across the School of Design, we remain committed to identifying and removing systemic barriers to accessing college programs and services, and are committed to identifying strategies, tools, and actions to better support our Indigenous student population. In a commitment to build connections and opportunities for students to engage with design's visionaries, Yes features a week-long lecture series, 18 to be exact. The design-focused speaker series has been cultivated in an effort to provide dynamic perspectives and unique discussion opportunities for members of our community, including students and faculty alike. Honest advice for designers from really good designers connects the School of Design with those who have impacted the industry on a local and global scale. We encourage you to ask any questions you have for Kaila and Jay in the YouTube chat. With that, I'm happy to introduce our speakers. Jay Wall is a principal and creative director of RallyRally, a Toronto-based design studio dedicated to social change. For more than a decade, he has led the creation of brand identities, publications, websites, and campaigns with purpose-driven organizations such as the Centre for Social Innovation, the McConnell Foundation, and the City of Toronto. Jay's work has appeared in Adbusters, and his team has been recognized with 3 Social Good Design Awards. Jay was recently named the national winner of the RGD Ultra Bold Awards, recognizing designers under the age of 35 who are making a positive impact in the Canadian design community. Kaila Jacques is a creative director at RallyRally, a design studio dedicated to social change. At RallyRally, Kaila has led major projects with a range of organizations including UNICEF, United Way, and Robert Wood Johnson Foundation. Prior to joining RallyRally, Kaila worked at Bruce Mau Design, developing expertise in the cultural and education sectors. Before that, she was a designer at Evergreen, a not-for-profit focused on urban sustainability. As an advocate for a more inclusive society, Kaila has collaborated with her brother Michael, who has autism and an intellectual disability, to publish 2 books about inclusion and belonging. Moderating the Q&A portion of today's session is second-year graphic design student Mary Gitson. Mary Gitson is eager to push the boundaries of typography, information, and editorial design. She believes that design can make the world a better place and strives to work on socially, culturally, and environmentally significant projects. Mary was involved in projects related to LGBTQ+ rights, dementia education, and sustainability. She's been integral in putting together the year-end show with me this year, along with her peers. Namely, she worked on the printed invite, presentation decks, and concept development. I'd like to personally thank her for these contributions. In her free time, you can find her missing winter, enjoying the smell of ink, and dancing at midnight. Welcome, Mary. With that, I'm pleased to turn it over to Jay and Kaila to start their presentation.
Great.
All right. Thank you, Anna Rita, for the introduction. And thanks, Mary, for joining us. Looking forward to our conversation. Thanks, everyone, for coming to hang out with us. As you've heard, we are RallyRally. And so today we're going to talk to you about what we do in our design practice, essentially design for social change. Alternate title for this talk is Rallying Together. Basically, we want to tell you the story about how we, our journey of how we came to be where we are as a studio, and kind of unpacking a little bit of the rhetoric around like design can change the world. How does that actually work in practice? So what are the limitations of that? What are the boundaries and the possibilities of where our discipline butts up against other disciplines and how we can take that further to advance social change through design. So let's take you on a little journey. I'm going to back up a little bit over a decade. Kaila and I actually met in design school at York and Sheridan. And this is a bright-eyed Jay Wall. This is our graduating class photo. And at this moment in my life, I had, the experience of being in design school was wonderful. Beyond just like learning how to be a designer, one of the best things I took away from it was critical thinking and asking questions about what it meant to be a designer and how we can actually what it means to be a designer in the world, especially in the 21st century. I had heard of the First Things First manifesto from the 1960s, which is basically a bunch of designers who were like, okay, we shouldn't just use graphic design and branding to like sell stuff and push consumerism. What if we also had these other more noble goals? And that manifesto has not been without critique, but it planted some seeds of the kinds of things we would talk about in design school about the role of design and social change. And so I was really at this point, fourth year of school, asking myself and asking our peers and our classmates, can design save the world? I don't know, maybe that question was a bit naive, but that's what the young Jay was asking. Now, a few weeks after our grad show, there was this big moment in Toronto, the G20 summit, where there was mass protests and a massive police presence across the city, and there was about 1,000 unlawful arrests that weekend of police swarming protesters. This photo is actually taken from the intersection at Queen and Spadina, which is just a few feet away from our studio. And this weekend, or that weekend, was pivotal in my life because I was out in the streets sort of as someone who was starting to become engaged in social justice issues. I wouldn't have called myself an activist at that point. I was curious, and I was also concerned about the police presence. And I ended up myself getting unlawfully arrested that weekend. Was essentially disappeared off the street for 28 hours and arrested and put in a cage and strip searched. And that experience was horrifying, upsetting, and traumatizing. I did get a little souvenir out of it, this bracelet, this pink bracelet with my prisoner number. And coming out of it, my charges were dropped. It was clear that the police were just targeting people who might potentially be protesters. But the experience, as upsetting as it was, also was key in opening my eyes to my privilege, specifically my white privilege. And as a white guy who, interacting with the police, I'd never had this kind of negative experiences before. And so these things I'd been thinking about in terms of social justice suddenly came into focus. And I was like, you know what, it planted in me an anger against injustice and a desire to fight against injustice as a designer. So I pretty quickly threw myself into the world of becoming a design activist. I'd go to design things for climate marches. It's actually a picture of me dressed in an owl costume with a sign that says "Give a Hoot." And I was also doing a lot of branding and campaigns for small grassroots activist organizations. Those working in fields like mining justice or public space advocacy. As was mentioned earlier, I actually got some work featured in Adbusters. We can go ahead here, Kaila. And so this was, sort of my early days as a designer. I was trying to figure out how to be a design activist. Just started very quickly out of school, started my own independent design practice, and not necessarily making much money or any money off of this, but trying to figure out what it could mean to reconcile my emerging social justice values with what I saw as the potential for design to help advance these causes. So meanwhile, Kaila will share a bit of her story and how she ended up here.
Great. So, hi everyone. I'm going to share a bit about my journey before RallyRally. So, as Jay mentioned, we were classmates at YSCN, the York program, and then after that, I stayed and decided to do the Master of Design program. And the reason for this was really I wanted to get a deeper understanding of something that was very close to my heart and that I wanted to further explore. I wanted to look at how is there a relationship between design and individuals who see the world differently. As mentioned, my brother has autism and an intellectual disability, and something that I always found interesting is the challenges he faces around time. And so even today as an adult, he's 30 years old, and he struggles with understanding the feeling of time. So at his work, what does a 15-minute break feel like? So I wanted to make sure that I could explore something and enter the world with a stronger portfolio, and that I really dove into something that I was interested in. At the same time, I started doing some freelance work at Evergreen Brickworks. I was always interested in the site in Toronto and what they were doing around creating more livable green spaces in cities. And I did a lot of, or some of the on-site signage, as well as the marketing materials with them. So that was a great experience. Kind of my first step into the design career was at Bruce Mao Design, where I really I was there for about 4.5 years. I got to work with amazing people from across the world, really get to understand what the design process looks like, and the thoughtfulness around that, dive into sectors that I was interested in, which were education, culture, and health, and then work on a range of projects from anything from print, branding, to web. So this was a wonderful experience for me to kind of build my design skills and how I wanted the design process to look, and to move forward with that experience. Another thing that I always like to talk about is my brother's 2 books that he's published. His first one, Can't Read, Can't Write, Here's My Book. In 2018, he published this book. And really what this book has done for him is acted as a tool for him to be able to shift the narrative around what it means to have a disability. Really played a role in being able to amplify his voice. My brother is the true hero here. He's making the great change. He gives talks to schools, organizations about inclusion and belonging and how important that is in our world. And he also produced or published a children's book called I Belong, Can I Play? So he's a big motivator in kind of design for social good. And this has led me to RallyRally, which I'll pass the mic back to Jay, and the experience that I had there.
So about 5 years ago, which was about 6 years out of design school, Kaila and I reconnected. I had been off on this journey of trying to figure out what it meant to be a design activist, working with small nonprofits and grassroots organizations and social enterprises and artists. And Kaila was off, doing her master's and getting this great experience at Evergreen and at Bruce Mau Design. We reconnected and created what is now known as RallyRally. So we are a design studio dedicated to social change. We like to say that we work with change makers for a more just society. And we're going to shortly show you a bit of some examples of what we mean by that. We're a team of about 5, our core team, plus some occasional collaborators and troublemakers. We work across a wide range of issues. They're listed here, ranging from climate action to human rights, mental health, education, affordable housing, and participatory city planning, to name a few. Our clients include lots of nonprofits, foundations, governments, and social purpose businesses as well. We've worked with everything from small grassroots organizations here in Toronto to city governments, to international organizations like the International Institute for Sustainable Development or UNICEF. Shortly, we're going to share with you some of those client projects, but just a quick little detour. In addition to doing our client-facing work, our client-driven work, we also take time as a team to get away from our computers and do other engaging projects in the city. So for example, we've been doing a number of projects with Street Art Toronto, where we're either painting traffic signal boxes around the city that were formerly gray, putting some interesting quotes on them. It's a fun way to get out on the street and interact with people, or painting bike lane murals like the one shown here, where we wrote Wadobagong, which is the original Indigenous name of the place that we call Etobicoke. And let's go to the next example. This is another example of a project we did with an Indigenous designer, artist, activist named Isaac Murdoch. And so this was a few years ago. We came together to create this campaign called One Land, One People, really asserting Indigenous rights, challenging the idea of borders, and extending solidarity to folks migrating from Central America. And we worked with Isaac to create these simple graphics referencing some Indigenous prophecies of the eagle and the condor as a sign of solidarity, and that those graphics are actually spread around the world and used in different places as a sign of support, solidarity, and hope for those on that journey. So shifting gears now, we're going to show a handful of projects, and we hope by doing this you get a sense of a little bit of our process, as well as the types of organizations we work with, and how we see ourselves, our humble role as designers, supporting the important work that our clients, our partners, are doing. So over to you, Kaila.
Great. So our first project that we want to share with you is with the Center for Social Innovation for Climate Solutions. So I'm going to talk a bit about the client here, which is the Center for Social Innovation. They are a social enterprise based in Toronto, and they really specialize in having shared spaces for people that are doing work to better the world. And Climate Ventures is an initiative that is out of CSI. And so Climate Ventures was the brand and the website project that we had to do. And it really focuses on a hub and an incubator for entrepreneurs and leaders that are doing work around climate solutions and climate justice. So to talk a bit about the identity, so this was a startup that they needed a logo that felt legit, would increase awareness about the programs, the community that they were building, and get funding. So Climate Ventures, we created this kind of circle, this dynamic identity that transforms. We wanted it to reflect not only what we felt would be happening with these amazing people working in climate justice work, but also a reflection of the world and how it's transforming and how we have to adapt to that. It really gives us an exciting and energy around it. We created for them a website where we introduced kind of their visions, the programs, the spacing, the community. It was really a hub to showcase the different people that are working together to do this type of work. So there are 3 focus areas, as I mentioned, as a co-working space, the community, and the programs. And for us at RallyRally, this has been a really great ongoing relationship with the team at CSI, because we've been able to evolve the brand and the different pieces like the website to showcase other programs that they're getting once they have funding. So this is a flagship program called Earth Tech, which we were able to put as a piece on the website, really highlighting the people in, this is a poster example of someone doing work. People are doing things from looking at fashion to transportation. They're able to kind of find each other and filter through the website through sustainable development goals, which can kind of put them in connection to other great people doing work. And from this experience, what Climate Ventures was able to do was really attract members, get funding, get media attention, and really establish this credibility of the great work that they're doing. And their members were able to raise $33 million in the last 2 years. So that's a huge accomplishment. Another thing that we were able to do is this is in the CSI building on Spadina. So we were able to go to the site and put some of the graphics throughout the space to really embody the brand.
So one of the cool things about the types of organizations we work with is that they're connected to many other organizations. And this next project is a good example of that. So Kaila just spoke about Climate Ventures, and one of the member companies based out of Climate Ventures is called PhyTech, and they work in the clean energy field. So I want to introduce you to Marianne and Tom. These are the 2 people behind PhyTech Environmental Technologies. They work in biogas. So Tom is a big biogas geek. If you're not familiar with the field of biogas, let me tell you, we've been learning a lot about it. Basically, biogas has to do with taking organic waste and transforming it into renewable energy, going through a series of pipes and tanks and various scientific processes. So let's say something like your green bin waste or wastewater, whether it's from farms or municipal facilities or food production. They're able to basically create a more circular economy and create renewable natural gas rather than using like more destructive forms of energy production. So biogas is like a pretty tricky thing to understand, and they came to us a bit over a year ago looking to improve their branding and marketing. So PhyTech already existed as a version of it existed in Germany since a couple decades ago, and they were now looking to open up a North American office. And so we looked at how to build on the legacy of the existing German brand and adapt it from the North American context. So we shortened the previous name, Finsterwalder Umwelttechnik, to PhyTech, and we took elements of the existing German identity and adapted them into this mark for PhyTech. The red arches actually have a bit of a backstory about their innovative engineering, as well as sort of a bit of countercultural narrative that went with the founding of the company. We've embraced those for PhyTech, and really one of the challenges of this is or the opportunities that we saw working with them is the field of biogas is inundated with lots of like blues and greens and just this very eco vibe. And it also just saturated with like technical engineering jargon that is relevant for biogas geeks like Tom, but doesn't really speak to other people who might be looking to hire biogas companies like PhyTech. And so we worked with PhyTech to develop their identity, but then supporting messaging framework, like with a tagline and messaging like "waste has never been this clean," to help position PhyTech and explain what is special about PhyTech. They see themselves as the Apple of biogas, where everything is like really thoughtfully designed from end to end, whether that's creating a biogas plant or consulting on services or selling biogas equipment. So we've supported them with the whole branding. We also did photography at 4 biogas sites across Canada and video. Recently built a website and did a lot of the copywriting for it. And it really helps to show the beautiful work that they do and balance this kind of like marketing language that's more inspiring with these more technical engineering moments when we're saying, okay, here's how it works. Here's what the product is. So we're kind of holding those two things together. One of the really cool pieces of feedback that we've heard is that despite PhyTech being a small but growing company, they're essentially, we've made them look like something is bigger and more established, which is really great for opening up possibilities for them in the North American market. We've also heard that when people pick up the phone and call PhyTech, they're already on board, they're already convinced, they already get it. You know, just having spent a few minutes on the website or watching this, like the brand anthem video that we created that tells the story behind the company and gives you a really like inspiring glimpse into their work. By the time people get in touch with PhyTech, they're like, okay, how can we make this happen? So this project has been really a really great opportunity for us to look holistically at how a purpose-driven business tells their story and how that can help them to get more business and ultimately have a greater impact on the climate action that they're looking to take.
So our next project is with UNICEF for the rights of women and girls. So this was actually one of the first projects that I was able to work on when I joined the team at RallyRally. And it was a very, very important project and a big project, a large project that we knew was going to take a lot of time and collaboration. So we worked with UNICEF to create a gender-based violence resource pack, an emergencies resource pack. And really what this is it would be used by UNICEF workers and partners, whether it's in country offices or in the fields, to look at responding and preventing gender-based violence from happening to women and girls, specifically in emergencies. So things like war zones or refugee camps or natural disasters where women and children are a lot more vulnerable. And so what we were tasked kind of to do was to look at this extensive resource pack that had over 2,600 pages of content. So you can see that we bound all the different sections of the resource pack and really dove into what the content was about. Very serious content, very important content that needed to be accessible to UNICEF workers to be able to address this. So we knew we didn't want to create an encyclopedia. We knew that it needed to be functional and usable for the workers. So we created different prototypes in the process, presented these to the clients. We were working with a writer that was in Australia. She was developing all the content, and we were able to use design to kind of facilitate a conversation to be able to adapt and change the content based on the format that we decided to go with. So was this a kit that was a bunch of kits that had many different pieces in it where you would open and you discover the different books that you'd need? Or is it a set of binders that had these really clear sections within them? We decided to go with a series of kits. There was 9 human-centered kits developed that kind of hit everything from getting started to assessment to response, which is kind of the middle, 3.1 to 3.5 or 7, I should say, and evaluation at the end. And in each of these kits, you would find different pieces. So these are some of the covers of the guidebook, and the guidebook essentially took you through the process of being able to figure out how to use all the materials. So just to speak a bit about the visuals here, we wanted to create something that made UNICEF workers proud and felt optimistic to be able to use these books. So we were really inspired by the shapes, the colors, and the textures that we saw in images. And we created these abstract compositions. Along with that, we had kind of a different formula for each of the covers, the case study book, really highlighting the people and images. We used icons on the tops of these books to relate to the content that you see throughout the narrative and kind of guide you to what tool you needed to access. This is an example of the guidebook that I talked about, where it really was the key piece to the project. And then as you would read through, you would learn, or you'd be directed to other pieces within the kit. So the case studies, this is just a blurb. You could read the full extended version in the case study booklet. You could access other resources, tools, capacity development, those icons all kind of taking you to the main books. Again, showing images of women and children that are positive and optimistic. And we created a lot of evaluation tools, and this really helped with assessing the different locations and being able to respond to that. And learning modules, this was another document that was for country offices where they would be able to teach about gender-based violence in emergencies. The interesting thing with this project was that we had different audiences we had to respond to. We had people that were experts in this field, and then people that were just getting started. So being able to create something that could be skimmable to the expert and something that someone could really dive deep into if they were new to the content, and still have it accessible in an easy way. So as I mentioned, this was a very important project for our team. It's being used across the world to address a very serious humanitarian purpose, and we were very happy to be a part of this project.
Okay, shifting gears a little bit, I want to take you to the great city of Windsor, Ontario, and talk to you about a project we did there with the Transit Agency for Integrated Mobility. So just a little bit of context, Windsor is a city of about 200,000 just across the border from Detroit. And it's a city that's growing and changing, increasingly diversifying population, lots of newcomers. The city's evolving, and it also kind of has an identity that's somewhat attached to Detroit's identity as a car city. So this is a place where a lot of people drive. The bus system basically hasn't really been thoughtfully updated in about 40 years. So the public transit system is just buses. And let's go ahead, Kaila. Mm-hmm. Thank you. And basically the opportunity in this project was to create a new transit master plan. Essentially what that means is Transit Windsor was looking at every aspect of their transit service, from marketing to customer experience to the actual design of the routes, the types of buses themselves, changing their fleet. Basically just like looking at every aspect of how can Transit Windsor better serve the changing needs of Windsor. Now we worked with Dillon Consulting and their team of public engagement specialists and public transit planners. And we supported them with this master plan study, and specifically the community engagement portion. So there was a lot of work that was just looking at like the technical aspects of like, okay, what are the patterns of the city and movement, and like looking at data pulled from like movement across the city. But then the other side of it is like, okay, we want to open this up to Windsorites and get their input. Why don't you ride the bus? If you do ride the bus, like how could it be better for you? What are you concerned about? And so we created this public engagement campaign to get input from folks across the city. We came up with this campaign called More Than Transit. We use messaging like Shape Transit, Shape Our City. Here's an example of it out in the world. And I'm just going to step back now and speak a little bit about the visual DNA behind the project. So this is the existing Transit Windsor identity. We did not design this. This is from the 70s or 80s. Within the scope of this project, we were not going to be redesigning their identity, but we did want to see like without them having comprehensive brand guidelines that we would refer to, what could we pull from the existing identity that is recognized across the city in a way that could inspire some new visual energy for this project. So looking at that logo, we pulled out the blue circle, the green arrow, the yellow parallelogram, and these became some really graphic, vibrant shapes that we used to create this dynamic system. And we reinforced that with messaging about the idea of shaping and movement, right? So shape transit, shape your city. If you look at our campaign materials, we had messaging that explained how this isn't just about like, the bus isn't just about from getting from point A to point B. This is really about like, how can a better transit system connect us to school, to work, to the hospital, to our friends and family and shopping, and so on. So we were really looking comprehensively at that. And that was important because thinking about the context where a small percentage of Windsorites actually ride the bus and most people just take the car and would never think about riding the bus, we wanted to prompt them to think like, oh, like what if? Like what would it take for me to leave my car at home and ride the bus? So we had these, this this campaign out in bus shelters. We had it on social media, customized for different audiences like student groups. And then we also had this video, which Kaila is going to share now. So that was an example where we, developed this graphic system and then just adapted it. There wasn't a budget for a high production value video, so we just thought of it as kind of an animated poster, something to help draw attention on social media and drive people to the website where they could fill out a survey or go to a public meeting and give their input. Additionally, we had ads like this on the buses, but we made sure that they weren't limited to being on the buses, so that we're reaching not just transit riders. Ultimately, this had a really positive outcome. We had participation from over 2,000 community members gave input on the survey alone, as well as more doing phone surveys or participating in public meetings. The city council and the mayor called it one of the most successful community engagement processes Windsor has ever done. And ultimately, it helped to inform a new transit master plan that was drafted and then approved by city council. And so there are now concrete changes happening in Windsor to roll out this new transit master plan, ultimately improving public transit service. And again, with the work that we did here didn't replace the important work that the transit planners are doing or the transit agency that's going to have to roll this out. But we made sure through our campaign that people participating weren't just the usual suspects of the most vocal transit advocates, but we're actually reaching deeper and reaching further to get more broad participation from Windsorites.
Great. So the next project I'm going to take you through is with the City of Toronto for housing affordability. So a project that we did also with Dillon Consultants with the City of Toronto, we collaborated with them to create a campaign that looked at this issue that Toronto has been facing for quite some time of housing being affordable. So the City of Toronto wanted to create not only something that would educate the general public, but also get them involved in shaping one policy solution, which is to build mixed income housing. So this slide kind of says, is a big statement, only 2% of housing built or approved in Toronto in the last 5 years has been affordable. So this is an issue, and this is something that we need to look at. So we wanted to make sure that we created visuals and messaging for this project that felt approachable, relatable, and relevant to the general public that we wanted to hear from. So we were very transparent with language such as everyone should be able to afford housing in Toronto, but we know not everyone can. So what do we need? We need people to get involved and to help shape that policy. We also know that what does affordable mean? There's a lot of things that we need to address here in terms of defining that term. And so this is something that you could help with when contributing to this campaign. We also had messaging that highlighted the people of Toronto and how important diversity is with mixed income housing. And we kind of played with the spectrum as a theme throughout this campaign. So not only do you see houses that have a spectrum of color, but we also highlighted occupations or jobs from A to Z. So accountants to nannies to students, etc. Everyone should be able to afford housing in Toronto, but we know that not everyone can. To speak a bit about the visuals, we wanted this to really stand out. It was used a lot in the bus shelters in Toronto, and we took the shape of a home. And we know there's a lot of diversity in homes in Toronto, whether it's a detached home, a low-rise condo, or a large tall-rise condo. There's lots of diversity, but we liked the idea of a home, and we want to focus on the beauty that comes from implementing mixed income housing, which essentially assigns a percentage of houses that are built in Toronto to developers or new developments that needs to be affordable. and kind of shaping the parameters around that is what the city was looking to draft. This is some materials that are used with the public to get the input, and some data visualizations with our system and our housing overlay treatment. And these really vibrant colors we wanted to use to kind of show the beauty in mixed income housing. And then as a result of this, the policy is still being finalized, but what we learned and what we were told by the city is that it really helped to bring these conversations and find some common ground between key stakeholders, which housing advocates and new developers, to kind of have these conversations about different solutions that can be imposed so that, you know, our city is diverse with mixed income housing.
Okay, one last project to share with you. So this one is with Artery for equality and civil rights. Artery is a startup that brings together artists, performers, and people with spaces to host them. So for example, let's say you want to put on a concert, maybe you need a venue, maybe it ends up being someone's backyard like this, or I've heard of more quirky Artery experiences where there's like an opera in a bathroom and there's like one person standing in the bathtub singing and like 5 people who bought tickets crammed into the bathroom watching. Very interesting range of possibilities. So basically the Artery community, they are made up of passionate supporters of the arts as well as artists and creators. Now, back when the previous president, I'm trying not to say his name, when the previous president was elected, and there were immediately a lot of xenophobic and racist policies put into place by the US government, the Artery community, which has a very strong contingent in Toronto as well as New York and growing around the world, but definitely a strong American presence. The Artery community wanted to come together and assert their voice and say, like, we care about human rights, we care about equality, we reject these new policies. So they came up with a campaign called 14A. 14A stands for the 14th Amendment, which essentially asserts the rights, equal rights for each person under the law of the US. So they wanted to have a series of showcases under the umbrella of 14A, showcases meaning like performances. And we worked with the Artery community to develop a look and feel for this campaign, basically like a temporary brand for the campaign, a bunch of materials that could help them to spread the word about their performances while also making like that clear statement about what the Artery community stands for. So we developed this visual identity, and it's basically based on the equal sign. But the cool thing about it, it also references the stripes of the American flag, as well as acting like a stage. So you take that equal sign, you can actually open it up, and it becomes a platform for different kinds of messages, whether it's typography or whether it's photos or graphics. So we created a series of different templates and graphic materials for the Artery community to work with to spread the word about their performances, to share highlights from the campaign as it evolves. The colors we leaned into were really sort of referencing the Women's March, that like teal blue and that coral red. But we also heard from some people through the process that maybe they weren't comfortable having like something that leaned so patriotic. And so we created an alternate color palette, everything from like purple to green to yellow to black. So if you wanted to like identify your piece as being part of the Artery 14A umbrella, you could do that even while pulling back from those more patriotic colors. And here's some examples of how it could be used on social media as well. So definitely like it made a splash. And we even thought about how to translate that experience from beyond like social media or print advertising into the actual experience of like going to a performance. And so you could have like these cards written out with a 14A, and like you fill in the blank with your own statement. So people could fill in and personalize what 14A meant to them and why they care about asserting these rights. So again, we just played a humble role here in supporting the very important work that those community members were doing. So that's our last case study. Just some final thoughts to kind of pull it all together. We've shown you a range of projects today for all kinds of different topics and different disciplines of design. Ultimately, I think a common thread you'll see through all of these is that good visual communication cuts through the noise and makes complex topics approachable, and therefore helps people to engage and take action. So tangibly, that might mean that people are just learning about a new policy proposed by the city and they can then participate in it. Or maybe it's helping an emerging business that's doing important work to get more traction. Maybe it's a nonprofit helping to do fundraising or to find partners or funders. Maybe it's just another organization that wants to explain the important work that they're doing and make sure that messaging is getting out to the right people and that that it's hitting home, ultimately building their movements and amplifying the work that they do. So, we think about our role in this, in as designers, like, we're not the heroes here, but we see our role as being really important to help advance the important work that our clients and our project partners are doing. So we can rally together to go further and make a greater impact. By having us on board, it helps them to take their work to the next level. So going back to the very beginning, when we asked the question of, like, when the naive young Jay asked the question of, like, can design save the world? I think where we've arrived now at this point in our careers is, like, we'll say design won't save the world, but it can make a difference. And that's why RallyRally is here, and that's what we're all about. Thank you so much for your attention.
Thank you.
It was really great to be able to share this with you, and I believe Mary is going to join us now for some Q&A.
Thank you so much, Jay and Kaila, for walking us through your process. It was very inspiring and insightful as well. I have a couple of questions about your process itself, and I think you shared some of the insights with us already. And I found that the project for FITAC that you worked on was very interesting because it was research heavy as well, and there was a lot of jargon involved that you probably had to dive in, and it probably took quite a bit of time. So I was wondering if with that specific project, you visited their facilities, maybe, and learned more about their operations, or how exactly did you immerse yourself into their world? Or maybe more generally, how do you immerse yourself into the world of the client?
Great. Kaila, would you like to describe our process briefly, and then I can speak to FITAC specifically?
Sure. Yeah, absolutely. So when we start projects, we kind of have 4 different phases of the project. Obviously, we shift when needed, but the first phase is really where we kind of dive in to know the organization and the client the best. And if we need to do site visits, or we host workshops with key stakeholders, or things with the city, it might be a 2-part where we have our key stakeholders and then we have some people from the community. Same with collaborators. Oftentimes we're collaborating with different partners on the project, so bringing them on board. But the first phase is discovery, and it's really learning about the project, the client, the goals, the tone, the audiences, etc., to really inform our design decisions and kind of take us on the journey throughout the process. And it really acts as a foundation to make sure that we're always on track as we move into the next phase. And it helps for the clients to hear what we heard. We might have heard it differently, but let's talk about that. Or how are the audiences going to respond to this? How do we make it more relatable to the people that you want to speak to? Because we know that our clients are passionate and really understand the topics that they're bringing to us. And it's a chance for us to kind of learn as new people to this world, like biogas and things that we might not be familiar with. Our next phase is design concepts. So that's where we really get to explore different ideas that we have creatively and present that to our clients, and many options often, trying on different hats and seeing what fits and resonates best with them. Phase 3 is design development. So hopefully one of those concepts really feels true to what they want to do and what they want to communicate. And then we make sure it works in all instances and really push that concept to feel well-rounded and that it can apply across a bunch of mediums, whether that's the website, social media, etc. And then phase 4 is really activation. So what are the final pieces that we need to provide the client so that they're successful in executing? Did we take on delivering some of those communication materials, and just making sure they're equipped to actually use the brand, speak about the brand, as well as their messaging. Jay, pass it to you.
Great. Yeah, thanks. That's a good overview of our process. It's really designed to get us from what the heck are we doing to, like, how are we going to do it? What does it look like and sound like? And then executing it and getting it there in the world. To the FITAC example you asked about, Mary, specifically in terms of biogas, like, yes, that was so much to learn about. So there's some of these topics where we have like repeating clients, or we've already worked on a certain issue related to like urban planning or climate action, where we really understand a lot of the subject matter to begin with, and we can get really quickly into like the questions of strategy that are specific to this project or that client. But this was an example where, like, despite PhyTech being part of the climate ventures community that we've been working with, we really knew nothing about biogas. And so we really had to immerse ourselves in that world. We actually started working with PhyTech right around the start of the pandemic, just over a year ago. And so we actually went several months without ever having a site visit. And so initially it was a lot of like watching videos, reading these engineering things, sometimes in English, sometimes in German, and trying to like make sense of the diagrams to try to understand the biogas process. Asking Tom to like just like walk us through his customer journey. So when he has someone reach out to them, what are the conversations he has? What are those pain points, the ways that we need to tell that story better? That kind of thing. And then, over time, we were able to get more into the nuance of, having a high level understanding of biogas was great at the beginning for be able to just like develop the brand platform generally and do some messaging, copywriting for the website. But then by the time we got into like, okay, we need to like illustrate products and explain systems, these very complicated things. If we want other people to understand them, well, we need to understand them first. And we're by no means biogas experts yet, but we have learned a lot. And a lot of that is just through like conversations, as well as like when COVID allowed us to, we were able to go to some sites and see, experience it up close and personal. And it's like one thing we love always is just like immersing ourselves in whatever the topic is and learning something new.
This is great. Thank you so much for answering this. Thank you for explaining your process as well. It's so thorough and has this distinctive 4 phases. I think it's very interesting. And speaking on the topic of COVID, did COVID change that process somehow? Maybe you found that there are some challenges that had to be addressed, and you found some ways to adapt to those changes. Because Jay, I think you also mentioned that there was a big problem with the PhyTech, specifically because you couldn't go to the site. So I guess that would be one of the challenges.
Yeah, good question. To be honest, it didn't like change our process dramatically. Like the overall arc of our design process remained the same, but we just had to find like different creative ways of doing it, so like using virtual tools. So as a team, we're like, mood boarding. We're not like pinning things up on the wall in the studio anymore and talking about it. It's like, we'll put things in a shared mood board file and like our Google Slides and like talk through it there. And moving like what used to be our in-person workshops with clients to kick off a project. And, we used to have this like immersive experience. We'd have like things pinned up on the wall. We'd have sheets for them to fill out. We'd have whiteboards. And it really helps people to get loose and comfortable and kind of like be present. And so we've experimented with different ways of like kind of recreating that experience virtually. And to be honest, we've found that kind of like less is more, like not overwhelming people with like, okay, let's all like learn this tool and like be like whiteboarding together. It was just like, everyone look at our screen and we're going to walk you through some questions, ask some prompting questions and have a conversation, and we'll like kind of take notes and document it. So just kind of like made it a little bit more like simple to be able to like streamline that experience and keep people focused on the subject matter rather than being distracted by the tech, as we do the more like virtual collaboration.
Yeah, that's awesome. And it also makes us more resilient as designers to come up with those new ways of coming up with ideas and brainstorming, all of that. Okay, so I have another question about the topics and the clients you're working with. So the projects that you showed us today are very versatile, and they cover many topics such as urban planning and human rights and housing affordability. So the range is huge. And the question is, would you recommend to focus on one specific area when you're just starting out and want to design for social good? For example, maybe to focus just on sustainability and work with sustainability nonprofit organizations, or on the opposite, to try and tap into multiple areas and kind of diversify?
Well, I don't think there's going to be like a one size approach. I think people have to kind of like a little bit of follow their hearts and also follow the opportunities. I can just speak to like, my experience starting off the studio was, I never set out to be like, I'm going to work in like this sector or this sector and this sector. I was just like sort of naturally was in the beginning engaged in a lot of like public space issues, mining justice and Indigenous rights. And those were places where I was like kind of like hanging out in those communities and doing community work, not necessarily to try to get design clients, just because I cared about those things. And then those naturally evolved into like projects at first that were unpaid. And then as we got a bit more like credibility, being able to like find paid clients out of that, you know, and then getting involved in the Center for Social Innovation, which they're now one of our clients, but like we were members, like we're alumni of CSI. So I started off there at the beginning and like really built a great network. And there's people there working on all kinds of different causes. And so, you know, for me, it wasn't that it was like setting off on specific sectors that I wanted to work in, but just like, what did I care about? What was I interested in learning about? And that evolved over time. So, you know, we ended up getting like more involved in urban issues. And then the more we did that, the more like that opened up. You know, there did come a point a few years ago where it was like, okay, let's get intentional about like, not necessarily like limiting ourselves, but like, what are the opportunities that we see that we want to get more intentional to make sure we're not missing, you know? And so like right now we've seen in the pandemic, when all these sectors, like maybe arts and culture and like restaurants and breweries and like theater and like these are like really been affected by closures. Like meanwhile, the clean tech sector, which like FiTech is a part of, it's thriving because like climate change isn't going anywhere, and governments are seeing that we need to have a socially just recovery to the pandemic, and climate action is a part of that. And so it's, I think, you know, as an entrepreneur, it's been half just sort of like, where are the relationships naturally? Where do we feel called to support causes? Who's interested in working with us? But then also like looking at kind of the longer term, like as a society, where are those things moving? So that's what's worked for us. And, you know, I think everyone has to pick their own path. Kaila, would you like to add anything?
Yeah, I was just going to add something that kind of drew me to the studio, and the more I got to learn about it was hearing about the clients and how they kind of, our clients know about our other clients, not in a competitive sense, but in a way that like, oh, I know what they're doing and I support that, and I'm going to like share the RallyRally team who have worked on this project. So I feel like Jay and the team has been really able to carve this space for us, and it's more about doing this social good work rather than the specific sectors that Jay mentioned. But something that I've also appreciated is that our team has asked the questions of who are some organizations you want to work with. So for myself, really caring about inclusion and belonging and having my brother as kind of his story has really touched my life. I've introduced Jay and the team to some organizations that he's part of. So Special Olympics Canada was a client that we were able to work with last year. And I appreciate being asked those questions because, as Jay mentioned, we kind of have things that we care about and want to learn more about and grow and bring RallyRally on board with them. And then we get to learn from each other because we all have our differences. So it's been a great experience.
Amazing. It's definitely very valuable to have this people with different perspectives and with different passions, and then something absolutely unique grows out of it.
Another thing I think I should highlight here is like, you know, when we started off like about a decade ago, there weren't that many design studios dedicated to doing this kind of thing, which is why I did it. But certainly not the first. Like we didn't invent the idea of design for social change. But I think like the sector is a bit more established in the States and to some extent in Europe. We are seeing less of it in Toronto, and a lot of design studios that would do corporate clients, nonprofit clients, and then like occasionally do something that was like kind of more up the alley of what I would want to do. And it's like, that's fine and great, but I wanted to like just immerse myself in that and to be able to offer to the people that we work with someone who's like fully committed to this kind of thing. So that's kind of why we did it. And now we're also, you know, now that we're several years into this, we're being mindful of like, well, what space are we taking up? Where do we need to step aside and like let the next generation, you know, do things? So like, we're not trying to like, you know, call dibs in every social justice project. And, you know, the good news is I don't know if it's good news. The reality is there's a lot of stuff we got to figure out as a society. There's no shortage of stuff to get done. You know, our competition is not the other designers who want to do this work. Like our competition is climate change, social injustice, mental health, you know, et cetera, et cetera. And so, you know, we're happy to see the next generation of designers want to step up and do this kind of thing and learn with us or alongside us or in parallel. And we're glad there's so many who are curious to do that.
That's such a great perspective to have. Yeah, I really loved what you said about fighting the climate change. Those are our main competitors, not the creatives, not our, I don't know, peers or our colleagues. Definitely. So we have some time for the audience questions. And I think the first question actually relates to the presence of social good companies in Toronto. So Katie is asking, there are a limited number of agencies that focus on social good in Toronto, and they're usually smaller and hire less frequently. Yeah. How do we get into designing for social good when there is a small market?
Okay, Katie, great question. So you're right, there's like a handful of agencies in Toronto that focus on this. There's also like, one of the things about the pandemic is it's opened up a lot of agencies to working like more remotely and not being limited to people working in Toronto, which includes our team. We have designers outside in other cities or even other countries. And so, I mean, I would say like definitely look to build bridges with those agencies in Toronto that you're inspired about, but also like don't limit yourself. There are lots across Canada and the States and even in other countries, but certainly like a ton in the States that you could look into for potentially remote positions. You can also like look at jobs in government or nonprofits or in social enterprise, like for-profit businesses who are hiring designers as well. And you can also go and seek out your own projects, whether it's like just like getting to know local causes that need support. And I want to give a shout out to our friends in Montreal at Loki Design. That's L-O-K-I. If you look up their site and their blog, they have a really thoughtful article about like what they call socially engaged design, kind of like challenging and critiquing like what that definition means and who's under that spectrum. Then also they list a number of design studios internationally. We're on the list, but there's lots of others. And I would suggest like looking at lowkeydesign.net and checking out their blog for a starting point of more studios to look at.
Thank you for answering this question. Speaking of Loki, yeah, it's a very powerful design initiative. I really enjoyed that work. So Adam is asking the next question, and it says, I'm wondering if you have any advice for an individual who wants to work with design and tech to address civic and social issues.
Kaila, is there anything you want to share here before I jump in?
Yeah, I mean, I would look for experience. I think, as Jay mentioned, reaching out to different organizations or getting in touch with other studios. It's also just great to reach out to studios and have initial conversations. And I think getting other experience too, just in design and tech, can also help to influence something down the road. So for instance, I didn't jump into this work right away. I worked at different places first to really just develop better skills to be able to then focus on something that I wanted to do long term. So just knowing that it necessarily doesn't have to be a tomorrow, it can be kind of a future thing, but that you can always have your eye on.
And I would recommend, since you mentioned design and tech, I would recommend looking at Code for Canada and Civic Tech Toronto, which are two different groups working in Toronto specifically to improve design and tech in government and civic services. One other piece that we didn't cover too much today, this would be a whole other like conversation, is actually like looking at the design process itself. So like trying to be rooted in social justice, not just in the causes that you're supporting, but actually how you're approaching design, how to look for like more like design process that does less harm, that gets people to the table in the right way. So just being mindful of like how to actually live out your values through the process and the way that you conduct yourself and run a business, rather than just the actual like portfolio piece itself.
That's great points. We have, I think, I don't know, maybe 30 seconds or so to wrap up the talk. So my last question to both of you is, what advice would both of you give to your younger selves?
Oh man, took less time
So
to
hard.
dive into this one. I would think like, every journey is different and can get you to different destinations. And as like cliche as that sounds, like looking back, I might not have taken the same path that I did now, but I'm still grateful for the opportunities that I've had, the privileges, and the amazing people that we've been able to work with. And the spirit of gratitude is important. Kaila?
Yeah, just to stay passionate and to keep growing and learning. I think it's important as designers to really stay open to learning about new things and evolving with the times and shifting things as needed. So yeah, just to stay nimble.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, but the gratitudes and staying open and open-minded is super important, especially in the industry that we're in.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you so much, Kaila
you.
and Jay, for sharing your knowledge with us today. We are really happy to have you here and dedicating your time to this show. It means a lot.
You're welcome, and thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Take care.
Bye-bye.
Bye.